My daughter-in-law, Marissa, is now a widow and must now raise their children as a single mother. This defendant broke a two-parent home, leaving our grandchildren fatherless. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Said like only a mom can say it. Dr. Fitzgerald, you're 5
Pretty
minutes.
hard to follow up my wife's testimony, but thank you, Chair Jordan. Thank you to the committee members here today, in particular, those who are concerned about these soft on crime approaches in this country and equally weak prosecutorial efforts, let's say, that have happened in the city and basically eviscerated a once noble police department, endangering the lives of all Philadelphians. We were both Philadelphia police officers for many years, so we identify what these officers are going through. In case of the murder of our son, Chris Fitzgerald, the DA here in the city has displayed an incessant and transparent unwillingness to expose a person of privilege to the death penalty. This is a capital crime in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This consideration is what the DA gives a jury. He empowers the jury to consider death. It's on the books, it's the law. When you raise your right hand as a district attorney in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and of this Commonwealth. I beg to, first of all, I'd like to see if Mr. Krasner's here. I don't think he is, but he had every opportunity to be here. And when he raised his arm and he swore, like we swore today, and to testify before you, to uphold those laws, he's not doing so when what my wife described meets every prong of a death penalty case. I don't care what your position is on the death penalty. What I do care about is that we uphold the law. The criminals in Philadelphia look at everything that goes on here. They watch TV, they listen to the radio. They know that Krasner gives them a free pass. We as a family, my daughter-in-law, my wife and I, on the 24th of this month, had to present the various aggravators before the district attorney's office. We should never have had to do that. A district attorney in any state or commonwealth in the United States should stand up for the families and the victims of violent crime, and those folks should also be the people who represent us and not have to be lobbied to do the right thing by law. We're not asking for anyone to die. We are asking for the rightful consideration to be given to an impaneled jury so they can decide what the fate is of this heinous murderer. This DA took almost 1 year to even take this preliminary hearing for our son's murderer to court. 1 year. 4 continuances he's allowed, more than allowing the defense to gather their information on mitigators in this case, well beyond that, to let the press die down, with the hope that since we come from Colorado, that we wouldn't come here, but we're Philadelphians. We care about the city. We care about the crime that's going on. And with all due respect to some of the testimony we've heard here already, this city is coming out of pre-pandemic crime numbers. I should say we're hitting pre-pandemic crime numbers. So crime's down in many cities across the country, but what level of crime is acceptable? I beg you. Certainly not acceptable to the police officers or to the community members that are latchkey and affected by the violent crime that keeps them in their homes inside of neighborhoods and don't allow them to enjoy the fruits of their labor. This prosecutor, Larry Krasner, has ceded the advantage to the defense. He represents us, he represents my daughter-in-law, he represents my dead son. And he ceded the advantage to the defense attorneys. I'll say this, it's unfortunate. He did a press conference yesterday, and he trotted out his supporters, and many of whom are black and brown, just like we are. We're a blended family, obviously. He had religious leaders in the city who've traded the potential for justice and a more livable city, in this case, for our son as well, to either be silent or to advocate for somebody that doesn't do the right thing, to advocate for someone that refuses to thoroughly punish individuals who deserve it, to advocate for someone who opens a revolving door for criminals in this city and around this city to come in and prey on citizens like the shooter did the night that he attacked our son. That's the power of some of the, as I call it, regressive district attorneys out there who mask their dangerous personal agendas and destroy hundreds of families. And they say it's under the guise of creating fairness and equality and being able to bridge the disparate impacts that it has on communities. But what about the impacts that it has on those community members who are actually affected by violent crime? Yesterday, if you were to listen to the testimony of Mr. Krasner and the pundits that he pushed up to the stage, it would have you believe that everything's okay. It's far from okay in the city. There are some great people working to correct things. Kevin Bethel is the new police commissioner. It's like family to me. He is actually the person that encouraged me to become a police officer. I have every confidence in the world in him. What I don't have confidence in is that Mr. Krasner will align himself with the mayor of the city, with everyone in the city trying to reverse the negative trends of violent crime in a true partnership and in a meaningful partnership, because he is part of the problem. He opens that door. He creates the recidivist opportunities to attack Philadelphians. I realize I'm running out of time, but I have to mention the vigilant efforts of the Philadelphia Police Department, the Temple University Police Department, and those who are out there every day and who keep their chins up. It's up to you, members of the committee, to help them keep their chins up, to keep bringing up the fact that pre-pandemic violent crime levels are still unacceptable. Yes, we've seen doubles, the amount of homicides in some cities and triple over the last few years. But even in 2018, those numbers were greatly elevated from previous years. We got to do something different. Philadelphia stakeholders have to do something different. I'll close out by saying I hope the testimony helps citizens better understand that district attorneys and the people that they're able to push out in press conferences aren't necessarily representative of the city as a whole, nor the feelings of citizens as a whole. We can conduct studies. We can do it now. I will help conduct those studies. But we need to ask every Philadelphian, every Philadelphia stakeholder how they feel. Because we have folks that align themselves with a certain financier who facilitate this notion that cities, inner cities in particular, are safe, when I know that the residents in inner city Philadelphia feel differently. I'll help them put those studies together, and I'll help them assess those results in a fair and unbiased manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Mrs. Fitzgerald, thank you. And Marissa, thank you. And Ms. O'Connor, God bless you all. Dr. Abaya.
Good morning. Thank you to the committee for inviting me to speak to you today. My name is Ruth Abaya, and I'm privileged to serve as an attending physician at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in the Division of Emergency Medicine. I've had the opportunity there to work on the issue of community violence through our Center for Violence Prevention, and I've had the past privilege, as you heard, to serve as the Injury Prevention Program Manager for the Department of Public Health. The issue of community violence is of critical importance to the patients we serve in Philadelphia. Violence has long been a public health crisis with significant impact on the lives and well-being of each and every resident of the city, and with a disproportionate impact in Black and brown communities with histories of chronic disinvestment. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Philadelphia and many cities across the nation saw historic increases in firearm-related violence. In 2020, firearm-related injuries became the leading cause of death for children and youth 1 to 19 years of age nationally. The impact of firearm violence is not just limited to patients and their immediate families. Research conducted at CHOP has demonstrated that those who live within a quarter mile of a shooting incident were almost twice as likely to come to the emergency department for mental health-related needs. This research also demonstrated that the closer a child's proximity to a violent injury, the stronger the effect. Our communities need true and lasting solutions to this crisis. Like many cities, we are seeing some promising reduction in firearm-related violence. However, 2023 remained above pre-pandemic levels. We must use this opportunity to learn more about what works to sustainably reduce violence and create resilient, thriving communities. I came to this work through my clinical training, where I often had conversations with youth who had expressed no expectation of living past their 25th birthday. Too often, survivors would be returned to their society with no resources to provide an off-ramp to safety, hope, or healing, and no connection to strategies that could interrupt the cycle of violence. Community violence intervention, or CVI, is defined as a suite of evidence-informed strategies that aim to reduce violence through engaging the community, especially those at highest risk. Individuals or groups are then connected to critical resources and services such as employment and trauma healing, and to interrupt cycles of retaliatory violence. This work depends on the knowledge and expertise of credible messengers, individuals from community who have lived experience and are well positioned to engage those at highest risk in CVI strategies. Community violence intervention is powerful because it has the potential to impact those at highest risk of involvement in violence on either side of the gun, changing a person's trajectory and impacting their life long term. One CVI strategy that creates a bridge between the hospital and the community is hospital-based violence intervention, or HVIPs. These programs are multidisciplinary programs that provide safety planning, services, and trauma-informed care to patients with violent injuries. The CHOP Violence Intervention Program, or VIP, provides long-term comprehensive case management services to youth who come to the emergency department for a violent injury. This work recognizes the long-term physical, emotional, and social impacts of violence. HVIPs have shown potential in reducing exposure to repeat violent injury, supporting basic needs and mental health needs, improving psychosocial outcomes, and reducing exposure to the criminal justice system. This model is part of the CHOP Center for Violence Prevention's comprehensive approach to addressing violence and its impacts in our communities. Violence and the resultant trauma can occur at many points in a child's life and a person's life, and the center does work with community partners around bullying prevention, addressing intimate partner violence, firearm safety and safe storage, and suicide prevention, all while pursuing rigorous research to understand the impact of these programs and strategies. The CHOP VIP program is one of several HVIPs in the city of Philadelphia, which cover most of our level 1 trauma centers. In my time at the Department of Public Health, we created an HVIP coalition that provided a community of practice around programs who are meeting the needs of violently injured patients throughout the city. In partnership with a similar coalition of violence interruption programs, such as Cure Violence, formed at the same time, these programs form a critical part of the CVI ecosystem, defined as the city's violence intervention infrastructure, connecting stakeholders who work in various sectors to implement a comprehensive slate of strategies that address the dynamics of violence. Working within a community of practice holds potential to limit duplication, identify common best practices, and improve the quality of services throughout the city. Many of these models have a critical point in common. They all seek to engage those at high risk of exposure to the trauma of violence. A critical role for communities of practice is to work together to strengthen the local ecosystem so that this work is streamlined and impactful. I want to end with the story of one young man whose story exemplifies how life courses can be altered by the work of CVI and why continued investment in this work can be so transformative. This young man was a survivor of violence, but he also had a complicated chronic disease. Between navigating his injury, contending with housing insecurity, and attempting to return to school, his physical and mental health were at risk. Through an HVIP, his violence intervention specialist advocated for him in the school setting, in finding stable housing, in securing his medications, and attending his follow-up appointments with his trauma team, and in getting connected to mental health services. These interventions likely saved his life and provided an opportunity to exit the harmful cycle of violence and find safety and health. Far too many survivors of violence could benefit from these powerful programs. The future of community violence intervention holds a great deal of promise for communities like Philadelphia, and investment in these models in the areas of programming and research can help cities build a sustainable path to violence reduction and community safety. We stand ready to support any such efforts. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify about this important issue. Looking forward to taking questions.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Bruschetta.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman and committee members, good morning. My name is George Bocchetto, and I have lived and worked in Philadelphia for the better part of 50 years now. I'm a trial lawyer, and during my career I've handled many high-profile and important matters in courts all over this country, including the United States Supreme Court. I was also engaged as the lead attorney to handle the impeachment process for Larry Krasner in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 2022. It is an honor to be invited to give testimony to this committee on this most important topic, and I thank Chairman Jordan for the opportunity. Larry Krasner took over the district attorney's office in 2018. What followed was an unprecedented explosion of crime and violence. Through a combination of progressive policies and endless incompetence, Krasner has actively encouraged criminal behavior. In Krasner's first term in office, the murder rate in Philadelphia increased by 78%. And I would wish to point out that when we note currently about the reduction in the murder rate, we're talking about a reduction from an unprecedented explosion of murders in this city. And the reduction level is still outrageous. In a single year, 562 human beings had their lives stolen from them. And it's predictably the result of these nihilistic policies that Larry Krasner has implemented. And who they impact more than anybody are the so-called persons who he's trying to protect, the minorities and the poor communities. Those are where the impacts are felt the heaviest. I got involved many years ago in a case with Larry Krasner in perhaps the most notorious case in Philadelphia's history, the killing of Officer Daniel Faulkner by one Mumia Abul Jamal, who admitted to the killing, was tried by a jury, and was convicted with overwhelming evidence. Since that time, some 30 years ago, Mr. Jamal has filed a series of appeals and repeat motions in an effort to gain his release from prison. And he was singularly unsuccessful until Mr. Krasner took office. During that time, Mr. Krasner had the 5th PCRA appeal filed by Abul Jamal and literally ignored the filing, missed briefing deadlines, told prosecutors to stand down. He was literally tanking the case to set free perhaps the most notorious killer in Philadelphia's history, and a killer, by the way, who's notorious internationally. I was engaged by Maureen Faulkner, Danny Faulkner's widow, and I filed an emergency petition in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court known as a King's Bench petition. I bypassed the trial level, I bypassed the appellate level, and I went right to the Supreme Court because of the seriousness of what was taking place. And I pointed out to the Supreme Court the terrible, irreconcilable conflicts of interest that Larry Krasner had in trying to tank this conviction. And thank God the Supreme Court stepped in, and we now continue to maintain Mr. Jamal where he belongs, in prison. There are so many other cases that I can point to and give you examples of individuals who committed crimes, violent crimes, who are allowed to go free on bail, who were released on their own recognizance, who were violating the Uniform Firearms Act, and are back on the streets committing murders in this city, committing carjackings, committing violent crimes. And this is all directly as a result of Mr. Krasner's policies. And I would be happy during the questioning period to detail exactly how some of those came about. Let me just also say this. It's not just that Mr. Krasner has taken upon himself to be derelict in his responsibilities in violent crimes and murder cases. He also regards himself as a one-man legislature. You know, in Pennsylvania, we have laws against prostitution, and those laws are designed to help drug-addicted young women who are victims of human trafficking and abuse. Larry Krasner has taken it upon himself and has issued a memorandum to his staff. We will no longer in Philadelphia prosecute prostitution. He overruled the Pennsylvania legislature in one fell swoop, and no one's challenged him on it. Well, we challenged him on the impeachment proceedings. Theft is also a crime in Pennsylvania. But in Philadelphia, you can steal up to $500 in a convenience store or a Wawa or a department store, and you will not be prosecuted. This is the one-man legislature of Larry Krasner, and it has led to a lawlessness, a street crime, a level of disrespect that affects everybody's quality of life and begs the criminals to become more emboldened and more dangerous on our streets. I'm here because I've dedicated my professional career to due process and the rule of law. And I can tell you, being in the trenches, working in this city directly one-on-one with the Krasner administration, the idea of due process of law and rule of law are abused, ignored, and disregarded. And it needs to stop. Thank you so much for hearing me out.
Thank you. Mr. Garber.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and members of the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. Thanks for visiting Philadelphia and discussing how we can make this community and other communities safer. As the Executive Director for Ceasefire PA, we're the Commonwealth's gun violence prevention organization, and our team includes gun owners who believe responsible gun ownership and gun safety laws go hand in hand, survivors of this crisis, doctors who've treated wounds in the emergency rooms, parents who worry about their children, and faith leaders who counseled families at the worst moments in their lives. I made my home in Philadelphia 17 years ago. I ride SEPTA nearly every day, often with my 5-year-old child, and commute around the city, including today. As you've heard, we saw an enormous spike in gun violence and crime over the beginnings of the pandemic. 1,000 more residents died from gunfire during that time. But contrary to public perception, criminal activity and drugs were not the primary drivers of this violence. A review of more than 2,000 shootings by law enforcement, public health experts, courts, and other public safety experts found arguments were responsible for 50% of all shootings. Drug trafficking was only 18%. This also aligns with what we know about widespread firearm access. It can turn everyday interpersonal conflicts into fatal accidents, including arguments on SEPTA buses, sitting in a car, and in a very sad Philadelphia incident while waiting for a cheesesteak during the pandemic in 2021. Social media further amplifies this conflict, especially among the city's youth. It's worth noting as we talk here that the same problem is playing out in other communities across the Commonwealth, even at higher rates. In 2022, the city of York had a higher homicide rate per capita than Philadelphia. Violence is going down, though. Gun homicides dropped in 2023 by 22% in Philadelphia. And for the current year, they have dropped another 44% compared to the same time period in 2023. We are on pace for less than 300 homicides, and while each of those is an awful catastrophe that we must still do more to prevent, it shows we're headed in the right direction. 3 things are driving the reversal. The emotional and mental trauma of the pandemic receded. Second, gun sales began to subside. There were more than 4 million firearm transfers from 2020 to 2022 in Pennsylvania. And lastly, and most importantly, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and state-level funding, there was a historic investment in community-based violence prevention programs. Those used trusted messengers to de-escalate conflict, help victims recover after shootings, stopping retaliations, Statewide, more than $200 million was given to district attorneys, local law enforcement, and nonprofits to address the crisis. In the case of Philadelphia, the city's Group Violence Intervention Program received funding, and groups that were involved in that program were 38% less likely to be involved in shootings than those that were not. Still, we must do more about this crisis, as we've heard today, and this committee, Congress, and the PA General Assembly has a critical part to play. There are multiple popular, bipartisan gun safety policies to prevent a shooting before it happens, rather than more victims being created and afterwards. 3 already passed the Pennsylvania House of Representatives with bipartisan support: universal background checks, extreme risk protection orders, and banning ghost guns. Ghost guns are the IKEA of firearms. You can order them online. They're mostly built, and in less than an hour with simple tools and no significant expertise, put together a firearm as deadly as any you'd buy at a dealer. In September of 2022, rec center worker Tiffany Fletcher was killed with one, and it's become a lucrative business for gun traffickers in the area. In Montgomery County, a trio was making a profit by turning ghost gun kits into firearms and then selling them. A few weeks ago, House Bill 777, to treat ghost guns like other firearms requiring background checks and serialization, passed with bipartisan support, including Representative Martina White, the former head of the Philadelphia GOP and Majority Caucus Secretary. A second pathway for firearms used in violent crimes are stolen or lost firearms. As the Cambria County's district attorney recently told media, there are a lot of stolen guns floating around. They show up on crime scenes on a very regular basis. Stolen guns also rose in conjunction with the rising violence being discussed today, climbing 38% between 2019 and 2021 in Philadelphia. But there's no requirement that you report your missing weapon if it goes away, if you lose it or it's stolen. And responsible firearm owners do report their missing firearms. It's the irresponsible ones, and those intent on trafficking guns that do not, and Congress could make it a requirement. Lastly, we should talk about where these guns are always coming from. If a health inspector didn't show up at your favorite restaurant for years, even a decade, you'd be much more likely to get food poisoning or find rats, because inspectors help ensure everyone follows the safety guidelines. Unfortunately, licensed firearm dealers operate in a world where they're inspected every 5 to 7 years by ATF. Most dealers will have few problems with these inspections. They work hard to ensure their weapons are not at crime scenes, even cooperating with law enforcement around suspicious purposes. But an analysis by the Brady campaign of PA's Track and Trace program, which was designed to help law enforcement prevent the trafficking that's enabling all this violent crime, found that 50% of recovered crime guns in the Commonwealth came from only 1% of dealers. The U.S. Congress needs to invest resources in the cornerstone of our public safety system to help law enforcement prevent the trafficking that's enabling this violence. The responsibility of this crisis rests with the General Assembly and the U.S. Congress, who have the ability and responsibility to address the firearms used in violent crimes. You must continue funding for effective community-based programs that help prevent shootings and retaliations, and strengthen gun safety laws to keep firearms from individuals intent on doing harm, slow gun trafficking, and support law enforcement efforts to address it. It will save even more lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gerace.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, committee members. Today, I would like to draw your attention to the failures of District Attorney Larry Krasner, or as we know him, let him go, Larry Krasner, in Philadelphia. Over the past few years, Krasner's radical progressive policies have had devastating consequences, leading to a rise in violent crime and endangering the lives of innocent citizens. One of the most concerning aspects of Krasner's tenure is his approach to criminal justice, which has resulted in the release of violent inmates who have gone on to commit heinous crimes, crimes that we've heard today. He prioritizes the pursuit of his ideological agenda over public safety. Let him go Larry has put the lives of Philadelphia residents at risk, or Uncle Larry, as the criminal underground in Philadelphia refers to him so lovingly. The tragic fact is that multiple individuals have lost their lives due to the dangerous individuals he has allowed back in the community. Moreover, the city of Philadelphia has experienced a significant increase in violent crime under Krasner's failed leadership. Over the past 6 years, the city has seen a troubling surge in homicides, shootings, and violent offenses. This alarming trend is a direct result of Krasner's misguided policies that have failed to effectively address and deter criminal activity. Philadelphia has been significantly affected by the increase in violent crime under District Attorney Larry Krasner's policies. The rise in violent crime has had several consequences for the city and its residents, including loss of lives. So it was mentioned earlier today, in this year we are down about a dozen homicides. 12 bodies, I say, would be a lot. It's a good increase, right? I think we could all agree on that. So what is it to be said when one person has murdered more than 12 people? one person is the result of the death of the murder of more than 12 people. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's a lot more than 12 people. Because of Larry Krasner, more than 12 people are dead today, and there's some of them, their family members are talking on this panel right now. One is too much. One is too much. He's a serial killer by proxy. It's his policies that are killing the residents of Philadelphia. The increase in violent crime, particularly homicides and shootings, has resulted in a tragic loss of lives in Philadelphia. This loss of life has a devastating impact on families, communities, and causing immense grief and trauma, which we have all witnessed here today. Fear and insecurity. The rise in violent crime has created a climate of fear and insecurity among Philadelphia residents. People are concerned about their safety and the safety of their loved ones, which can lead to a decrease in community trust and engagement. I encourage everybody up on the committee board, walk around Philadelphia for yourself and talk to Philadelphians. Pick them by will, and you will hear these sentiments by all of them. Doesn't matter what race, creed, color, or background. You will hear these sentiments. Disruption of daily life. The prevalence of violent crime can disrupt the daily lives of Philadelphia residents. It may discourage people from going out at night, limit their participation in community activities, and affect the vitality of public spaces. Economic impact. I would say he had a more devastating impact to Philadelphia than COVID has. This increase in violent crime has an economic impact on Philadelphia. Businesses may be hesitant to invest or expand in areas with high crime rates, and tourism may decline due to safety concerns. This can result in a loss of job opportunities and economic growth for the city. Not just in violent areas. Go downtown Philadelphia, the pearl of the city. Go look at all the businesses that are boarded up. That is a direct link to Larry Krasner and the crime that is going on. During the riots, 2,000 protesters were arrested. And away with his scepter, he got rid of those prosecutions. They were all gone. You know who got prosecuted, though? The Philadelphia Police Department. Went after Lieutenant Joe Bologna, one of the most respected officers in the police department, for a lawful arrest that he was committing. He dragged that man through the mud, and every time he went to court, it got laughed out of court and thrown away, and his district attorneys were reprimanded because it's a joke. If it wasn't so serious, it would be a joke. Strained community relations. The rise in violent crime can strain relations between different communities within Philadelphia. Excuse me. It can lead to an increased tension and mistrust amongst residents, making it harder to build strong and cohesive communities. It's deeply concerning that Krasner harbors a very strong animosity, and I would say severe hatred towards the Philadelphia Police Department. His personal vendetta against the police has created a hostile environment and hindered the collaborative efforts needed to maintain law and order. By undermining the very institution responsible for protecting our communities, Krasner has compromised the safety of Philadelphia residents and hindered the police's ability to effectively carry out their duties. In conclusion, District Larry Krasner's radical progressive policies have proven to be a disastrous failure for the city of Philadelphia. His ill-conceived approach to criminal justice has resulted in the release of violent offenders, leading to tragic consequences for innocent citizens and our police officers and law enforcement community. The alarming increase in violent crime over the past 6 years is a testament to his failed leadership. Furthermore, Krasner's antagonistic stance towards the Philadelphia Police Department has only further exacerbated the challenges faced by law enforcement in keeping our communities safe. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed with questions under the 5-minute rule. The chair recognizes the chairman of the subcommittee on crime of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs. You both.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today, for your poignant testimony, and we appreciate you coming out and testifying. And I'm just going to go with some of the questions, with some questions that came to my mind as I was listening to your testimony. And I want to just make this statement here. The health inspector analogy really doesn't work well for you. Because if the health inspector goes in and finds a lot of violations and then turns around and walks out, guess what you have? You got more food poisonings, more illness that comes. And that seems to be what's happening here. So I'll talk with you, Dr. Fitzgerald, first. Is that what's happening here? Are we seeing if you analogize that, if Larry Krasner is analogized to the health inspector, Is he letting people go? Is he letting these violations go, which is resulting in more problems for the city, more crime in the city?
In my belief, that's the correct assessment. When a district attorney fires tenured attorneys in his office, which is their prerogative, he's an elected district attorney, he can hire and fire whoever he like. However, he lost intellectual capital within the district attorney's office and the ability to therefore put the best cases together and prosecute offenders that deserve prosecution. Rookie district attorneys are now plea bargaining cases down, and that's affecting everyone in Philadelphia. So yes, it is analogous to a pest inspector who fails to perform their duties and allows, in essence, the city to be infested.
Thank you. Mr. Bacchetto, when we talk about the criminal justice system, there are reasons that you prosecute individuals. They include specific deterrence, general deterrence, restitution, the society's need for retribution and justice. The policies that you wanted to talk about with regard to Larry Krasner, please tell us, do they further specific deterrence when he is letting people out on cashless bail?
Quite the opposite. Larry Krasner's policies have literally been a license to commit further crimes, further lawlessness, and further terrorize the citizens of Philadelphia. I couldn't help but note that your question about the health examiner walking into a restaurant and not prosecuting or enforcing a regulation that concerns the safety of its patrons. It's exactly what's going on with Larry Krasner. How do you let people walk into stores, steal hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise, oftentimes from a single owner bodega or that type of thing? How do you let them walk in, steal things, and walk out scot-free? That's lawlessness. It's craziness. And it is emboldening these criminals to be more and more violent and more aggressive against our citizenry. And I want to say, hopefully, help is on the way. We have a new mayor in Philadelphia. Her name is Sherelle Parker. She's extremely capable and street smart. And she's avowed not to put up with this kind of craziness. The problem is that she cannot control what Larry Krasner prosecutes or fails to prosecute. And unfortunately, no matter how much a mayor wants to pitch in, to the extent that we have a district attorney who issues memos to his line DAs, you will not prosecute this crime. We have it in writing. There are memos. It's an outrage.
So Mrs. And Dr. Fitzgerald, whoever wants to take this question, there are standards that govern the death penalty cases in Pennsylvania. And you present to those, if you file your petition requesting a death penalty, you present those aggravating factors to a jury. They're the ones that make the determination on death penalty. What has been the process that you've engaged in with regard to the death penalty application, and what is Mr. Krasner and his team, how have they responded to your efforts and the process you've gone through?
So in this process, sir, and thank you for the question, the office, after our petitioning the office to discuss with us what their intent was to do with, to pursue either the death penalty or not to, in our son's case, they invited us in to make our own case, basically.
Is that normal?
No, that's not normal. The first question that we asked the committee that he considered the Death Penalty Review Committee, which is used by many other district attorneys across not only this Commonwealth, but across the country. Having come from Philadelphia, been born and raised here, come up through the city of Philadelphia Police Department, we are aware that he has not used this process before. He has summarily dismissed the fact that he wanted to or that he would ever pursue the death penalty. But in our case, we were afforded the opportunity, if you would put it that way, to present before this committee. We did so. We presented our own aggravators. We even attacked with the potential mitigators. Thankfully, my wife has worked homicides for years, both, just in the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office. She was a homicide investigator there. And being a chief of police and investigator, we were able to detach ourselves somewhat, if you will, from what happened with our son. But no family should ever have to lobby. No family should have to make it made to be felt as if we didn't do a good enough job before this committee, we wouldn't get justice. It's ridiculous. And I would submit again that one of the biggest impediments to criminal justice can be district attorneys. I spoke with Mr. Jordan earlier, and I talked about the preamble you had in your last report, and it talked about attorneys. It talked about attorneys being able to go after people and to get them, but they have that same ability to totally dismiss what the public wants and just go after what they want. And in this case, the clear want is to do away with the death penalty and to ensure that our son doesn't get justice.
Mr. Chairman, I have several unanimous consents, if I can present.
Gentlemen.
Yes. I present the certified copy of the fiscal year 2021 where the $33 million was removed from the police.
Without objection.
And then I have an article entitled Remembering Philadelphia Police Sergeant James O'Connor, killed in the line of duty 1 year ago, from Saturday, March 13, 2021.
Without objection.
And also an article entitled Make Sure Justice is Served, Slain Temple Police Sergeant's Family Calls for Death Penalty for Suspect, dated January 23, 2024.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald, thank you for sharing the story of your son's life and his service to the community. In addition to being a member of the Temple University Police Department, where he worked to keep college students and the university community safe, your son was also a father of 5 and an active member of Swagger House Run Club and Black Men Run Philadelphia, which both organize group runs through Philadelphia to raise awareness around gun violence. I appreciate your being here, and I offer you my deepest sympathies for your loss. I must say that the people of Philadelphia do not appear to share your opinion and that of Mr. Gerace and Mr. Bichetto of District Attorney Krasner since they reelected him. Mr. Garber, the civil suit against the teenager who shot and killed Sergeant Fitzgerald alleges that the killer suffered from mental instability, a propensity for violence, and a strong interest in possessing and using firearms. It also alleges that he showed signs again and again that he presented a high risk of harm to himself and others. Mr. Garber, how could the Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act, a federal red flag law, or HB 1018, a similar Pennsylvania measure, have prevented this shooter or others like him from accessing firearms, potentially saving the life of people like Sergeant Christopher Fitzgerald?
Thank you. Extreme risk protection orders are designed to help give family members who understand someone's in crisis or law enforcement an opportunity to temporarily remove the firearm. And because firearms are so fatal when used, as we've heard today, unfortunately, removing it gives us time to get the person to get help. And so there may be real evidence in that case that if extreme risk protection orders existed here in Pennsylvania, either through state or national law, that it could have prevented the shooting. It's also, though, worth noting that, as I understand it, the shooter, being under 21, could not purchase the firearm on his own, and I'm unaware of exactly where the firearm came from in these cases, and so we should also look at that question as well.
Mr. Garber, last Congress, under Democratic control, this committee led the passage of the Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act in the House. Last year, also under Democratic control, the Pennsylvania House passed their red flag law. Both bills passed their respective chambers with overwhelming support from Democrats and the support of some Republicans, but neither became law. What is your response to the lawmakers across the country who have voted against or criticized extreme risk protection orders?
I think these lawmakers are out of touch with their constituents, frankly. The only place gun safety laws like extreme risk protection orders are partisan is in the Capitol buildings. In Pennsylvania, over 80% of 80% of Pennsylvanians support red flag laws, and that includes people of all persuasions. It includes gun owners, it includes conservatives, self-identified conservatives, and Republicans. We need tools like this because when someone is in crisis, when they can get their hands on a gun, it puts everyone else at risk.
Mr. Garber, what does the research show about the rates of gun deaths in jurisdictions that have passed red flag laws?
The rates are lower when you have an extreme risk protection order and other gun safety laws on the books.
Thank you. Mr. Garber, are you aware of cases where people have spent 10, 20, 30 years in prison for crimes of which they were ultimately exonerated?
You know, it's not, I'm sure that is the case, but I'm not aware of it. You know, it's not something I study deeply.
Are you aware of the case in New York in which 5 black youths were convicted of raping a jogger in Central Park in 1989 and spent years in jail, and in which
yes,
Mr. Trump, as he was then, demanded the death penalty, in which they were subsequently exonerated?
I'm familiar with that. I mean, I'm familiar with the generalities of the case.
Do you think that death penalty laws give the risk of innocent people ever being executed?
Ceasefire PA doesn't have a position overall on the death penalty in these cases. We look at gun safety laws that can prevent the victims from being created in the first place.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Geraci, about a year ago, the governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, said that the divide in America today is normal versus crazy. You can go down the list of crazy policies the left now has. Like, it's crazy to have an open border.
Correct.
But in the context we're talking about today, some of the crazy policies, is it crazy to defund the police?
100%.
Crazy. It just makes no sense, right? Is it crazy not to say bad guys who violate the law should be prosecuted and let them go free? Is that crazy?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
When you have a district attorney who doesn't prosecute the bad
Yes,
guys,
that's crazy.
That's crazy,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Not following the law. And here's the problem. Craziness has consequences. How short is the Philadelphia Police Department today in police officers?
So we just, I believe yesterday, got rid of our 6th police district, which covered Center City. So now they combine with the 9th district because of lack of manpower. The 8th district is geographically gigantic. It could take from one corner to the other almost 20, 25 minutes, lights and sirens, meaning, you know, pedestrians get out of the way, cars are supposed to pull over.
Is there a number? Is there a number short? Are you hundreds of officers short?
Thousands.
Thousands of officers short?
So in the 8th district, there'll be times where there's 2 radio cars and maybe a wagon to cover an area that's
so there's a consequence that you don't have enough police officers to do the job when you defund the police and you don't prosecute the bad guys.
Correct.
But the real consequences are what happened to the Fitzgerald family, to Marisa, who lost a husband, to Mrs. O'Connor, who lost. Those are the real consequences, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I thought Dr. Fitzgerald said something really insightful in his life. He said a lot of insightful things. But one of the things that stuck out to me was he said, criminals aren't stupid. They're just bad. They know the fact that you are thousands of officers short.
Absolutely.
They know that if they do something wrong, that this, what did you call him? Let him go, Larry?
That's correct. Let him go, Larry.
Let him go, Larry is going to let him go, right?
Yes.
They know all that because they're not stupid. They're just bad guys. And bad guys need to be prosecuted. And in order to catch the bad guys, you need officers on the street. And right now, Philadelphia is lacking in both. They don't have enough officers on the street, and they don't have a prosecutor who will go after the bad guys if the officers who are on the street can actually catch them.
Correct.
That's the situation.
Yes. Do you want the honest truth of what's going on?
Sure do.
Police officers are afraid to do their job because Krasner is looking to hang every one of them.
You got to the next point. The next point is, and if they go out there and do their job, they're afraid that the press is going to come after them, or maybe worse yet, Mr. Krasner, who was the officer that was your friend, one of your colleagues who you worked with in the police, who Mr. Krasner took to court. What was his name?
Joe Bologna.
Joe Bologna. Right?
Absolutely. There's
That's
nothing
the
wrong with that
situation.
arrest. Yep.
And it goes back to what the good governor of Arkansas said. It's all craziness. It's just crazy to do it that way. I got 2 minutes left. I want to go to Dr. Fitzgerald because I knew you wanted to respond to something Mr. Nadler said, and then I want to yield any other time to our chairman of the Crime Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to respond by saying the objective here is not to invalidate or validate, let's say, for our family's purposes, the death penalty. We will stand up and with anyone who's unfairly prosecuted and unfairly sentenced because of bad policing. What we have here is bad prosecutorial actions or inaction. We won't stand for that. So we have rules for a reason, laws for a reason. And when our district attorney selectively, if not even prejudicially, right, determines what it is that he will and will not prosecute, I go back to what you said, Mr. Chairman. Criminals aren't dumb. They're not stupid, referring to what I talked about earlier. They know that when they run into stores en masse in downtown Philadelphia or anywhere in this country, and they run out with hundreds of, or even thousands at times, of dollars worth of products, they will not be prosecuted. If we want to be honest, being honest means talking to real Philadelphians, getting on the street, doing what Mr. Krasner and his pundits said yesterday, just yesterday, and that's let's get some real statistics. Well, let's get some real statistics and see what real Philadelphians think.
Yield the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to ask, I think, Mr. Bacchetta on this. When the district attorney doesn't prosecute, the public itself, we've talked about police, we've talked about specific victims of crime, but the public gets a malaise of hopelessness and helplessness. Do they continue to call police then when someone busts into their bodega and starts ripping them off?
You've put your finger right on the problem. The demoralization of the police department and the demoralization of the general public is stark. I want to give you one example, Congressman, that I think typifies this. I was involved in the Columbus statue litigation in Marconi Plaza in South Philadelphia. It's a beautiful little plaza and a park right on Broad Street. And I was sitting there with numerous Philadelphia police officers and a gang of 30 ATVs and dirt bikes and no mufflers came roaring down the street. Unmistakable. It was just as abrupt an interruption of a community's life as you can have. And I turned to the police officer and I said, didn't we used to prevent that kind of outrageous lawlessness on the streets? He said, yeah, we used to. Not anymore. You think I'm going to go arrest one of those folks and have Larry Krasner breathing down my neck? Yep. That is a direct example. I was right there. I was an eyewitness. And, Congressman, it is exactly what is demoralizing our community from the point of view of being able to rely on the government to keep safety alive.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have been delighted to welcome the Judiciary Committee to Philadelphia for a thoughtful and honest discussion about how violent crime has dramatically declined in Philadelphia in recent years, the challenges our city continues to face, and how the federal government can help. But that's not what's happening here today. Chairman Jordan has not convened the House Judiciary Committee in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection to explore how Congress can help to reduce violent crime in Philadelphia or anywhere else. Instead, he's brought his traveling circus to town in order to divide Americans, scare voters, influence elections, and distract from the crushing failure of the House majority to govern in this Congress. Chairman Jordan wants to convince people that gun violence is a Philadelphia problem, But the truth is, gun violence is an American problem that is traumatizing families in every corner of every community across this great land. So let's start by making three things clear. One, contrary to the statistics cited by the chairman, violent crime in Philadelphia has decreased dramatically in recent years. Two, our entire country continues to face a daily epidemic of gun violence. Three, that senseless violence is not inevitable, it's enabled by lawmakers who choose to sow chaos with political stunts like this hearing instead of doing their damn jobs. What makes today's sham hearing even more offensive is that while our Republican colleagues are trying to score political points here off the pain of families who have suffered grievous losses, they're simultaneously blocking votes on bills that would prevent gun violence in Philadelphia and across the country by keeping weapons out of dangerous hands and off our neighborhood streets. We all know too many people who've been scarred by gun violence, who've lost loved ones, neighbors, and friends, and who are crying out for action to address this public health crisis. But our Republican colleagues are deaf to those cries. We're seeing work on the ground across the Philadelphia region that offers hope.